right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos, and tonight I have a very special presentation for you guys. I want to talk to you about the psychedelic Eucharistic evidence in Western Christianity, ancient Gnostic heresies, and the Knights Templar. And so tonight's stream is one that I hope you guys enjoy, because this is related to my academic research. This is something that tonight's presentation in its entirety, in its argumentation, and its general premise and thesis, you're not going to get anywhere else. This is unique to scholastic research that I've been trying to do, and I hope that you guys find it interesting and that you support it. So if you do enjoy the content, please super chat tonight. Please throw a little support for the stream. Ideally, use the Streamlabs link, because this is going to be a very unique video that is nowhere else on the internet. And so tonight I want to deal with the evidence of psychedelic mushroom use within Christianity. This is a hot topic, and you guys may be familiar with a book like this, The Psychedelic Gospels, which gives evidence for different frescoes. And we're going to go through these one by one tonight, looking at what appears to be Amanita muscaria, the red and white mushroom toad, if you've played Mario Kart, this famous red and white mushroom that's very iconic, related to Siberian shamanism, and how it appears, and mushrooms in different forms appear quite evidently in frescoes in France, particularly in Germany, in Italy. There's one that we're going to be looking at in Turkey. And there's been a whole host of academic argumentation. We have John Marco Allegro in his book called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, where he argues that Jesus of Nazareth wasn't even a historical person. In fact, Jesus of Nazareth, what really was going on is that he was a psychedelic mushroom. And you see this imagery right here on the front of his book. This is related to Plain Chorale Chapel. And this is what it's referencing right here, is this fresco that was discovered in Plain Chorale. It's a chapel in central France, and you can tell right there that it's depicting the original sin, but ironically it looks very similar to a sort of mushroom tree, and we see Adam and Eve covering their genitalia with what appears to be a mushroom cap. This led John Marco Allegro, who is a Dead Sea Scroll scholar, and he was a scholar of many dead languages, to again put out this argument that Jesus of Nazareth wasn't even a historical person. Now, this cost him quite a bit. He ended up having to resign from different positions, but this has become a sort of mantra within the psychedelic spiritual community that maybe Jesus wasn't real. Maybe the whole sort of Eucharistic theology of Christianity was really just a psychedelic reality. And tonight, what I'm trying to show you guys is that it was never Christianity per se. And there's a lot of sophistication and nuance that I want to try to bring to this argument that I think is lacking, because whether it be the very popular book, The Immortality Key by Brian Murarescu, and he recently did a conversation over with Jordan B. Peterson on his YouTube channel, putting forth this idea that maybe Christianity is a psychedelic cult. Maybe that's what it was from beginning, and it's a continuation of the Eleusinian mystery. So there's this famous book right here, The Road to Eleusis, written by R. Gordon Wasson, who is a very famous amateur mycologist and worked with J.P. Morgan. We have Albert Hoffman, the chemist and synthesizer of lysergic acid, LSD, and then we have Carl A.P. Ruck, and Carl A.P. Ruck is going to play prominent in today's stream, whether it be his book Mushrooms, Myth, and Mythros, or more specifically his book The Affluence of Deity, which we're going to be diving into all this stuff tonight. That's what I mean. Tonight is going to be a heavy, heavy dose of academic argumentation, or his book The Apples of Apollo. Again, I'm going to be breaking down all this stuff, but Carl A.P. Ruck is a classicist scholar over at Boston University. And him and these other gentlemen put together this book in the late 1970s called The Road to Eleusis, Unveiling the Secret of the Mysteries. What is this about? This is about the ancient mystery rites of Mithras, of Eleusis, and Eleusis particularly, whether it be the mystery rites of Hermes or the mystery rites of Horus or the mystery rites of Osiris. There is tons and tons of these ancient mystery rites all around the ancient Mediterranean, ancient Egypt, and a lot of them, obviously, they're all going to be embedded within a sort of paganistic framework, a paganistic theology. But they make the argumentation in The Road to Eleusis, these gentlemen, that the famous mystery of Eleusis, which is depicting Demeter and her daughter Persephone. Demeter is the wife of Zeus. Persephone is their daughter. And within Greek mythology, Persephone is taken to the underworld by Hades. And this is what the reenactment, this is what the mystery of Eleusis is trying to reveal to everybody. We know that Aristotle and Plato and Socrates and many of the who's who of the ancient Greek world participated in the Eleusinian mysteries. So they make the argumentation that the kakekion, which is the beverage, the particular barley-based beverage that people were ingesting during the Eleusinian mysteries, that really what it is, it's a psychedelic beverage. And they based this on the fact that there was a vase found in a temple dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, where inside the vase there was fragments of ergot. Ergot is a sort of fungus, a fungus that can grow both on barley and rye. It's kind of like a corn smut. If you've seen that, if anybody's grown up around a cornfield and you've seen corn that was left unharvested, that a fungus tends to grow on that. And with barley and rye particularly, you can extract a form of ergot. Now, there's a lot of toxins within this, but the argument is that from Albert Hofmann particularly, that there's a way to extract, for example, different alkaloids. And those particular alkaloids can be inebriating. And so the inebriation of ergotamine, for example, can leave somebody in a psychedelic type state. And the argument of this book is that this was the basis of the ancient mysteries of Eleusis. And the Eleusis was not like any of the other mysteries. It was ginormous. It was huge. This was very popular and known throughout the ancient world. But in addition, we know that, for example, Zoroastrian mystery rites were using Pagama Harmala, another psychedelic substance. We know that the ancient Vedic religion of India had a deity called Soma, and there's a whole litany of speculation. Was it psilocybin cubensis? Was it the Amanita muscaria mushroom? Was it Pagama Harmala? Was it alcohol? A whole litany of different scholars have tried to put forth then arguments related to the identity of the Soma god of the ancient Rig Veda, the Vedic religion of India. And you have to remember that India was conquered by the Indo-European peoples. The Vedic tradition is related to the Indo-European peoples, and this is very important because works, for example, like Mushrooms, Russia, and History, a work done by R. Gordon Wasson and his wife, Russian wife Valentina Pavlovna, talks about how within the Indo-European languages, you'll see traditions related to mushroom picking. Specifically in the Slavic traditions. We're going to come back to that because it plays into my argumentation further today. And so the academic presentation, whether it be by Carl A.P. Ruck, whether it be by Brian Morescu, and this is more of a popular work. So Brian Morescu is not an ancient Christian scholar. He's not an ancient Mediterranean scholar. What he is a master's degree graduate in classical Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, and I think there was one more language that he had studied. And so what he does is try to use his language skills to make the claim that the key to immortality, the search for immortality, is the basis for all these ancient mystery rites like the Eleusinian mysteries, and that this is really what the Christian Eucharist is about. But the problem with much of his work is what I see as a word concept fallacy. For example, you open up this book, and right in the beginning here, it has this. I don't know if you guys can read this, but it has the famous saying on Mount Athos, if you die before you die, you won't die when you die. And of course, he has this in the Greek, and he makes reference, if you watch the video with him with Jordan B. Peterson, where he claims that, this is indicating of the psychedelic death and rebirth. And you see this often. He also makes the claim, he looks at the Gospel of John, and because the Gospel of John uses the Greek word mysterion, that means mystery, and then he claims that, if you go look up a Catholic book, it says that a mystery is related to a type of initiate, that it must then be one of these ancient mystery traditions, which is all about ritual initiation through psychedelic substances. Now, I say, easy, slow it down there. That you are falling victim to the word concept fallacy. Just because over a monastery in Mount Athos in Greek, it's talking about if you die before you die, you won't die when you die. Death within an Orthodox Christian context is totally understood in a different framework than an ancient mystery tradition. And because they bring these modernistic, contemporary, psychedelic hermeneutics to when they read scripture, to when they read anything, it's always leading to the same thing. So because the Gospel of John says mystery, it must be the same thing as the Eleusinian mysteries. It's the same thing because it's the same Greek word. Whoa. Just because you can use the same Greek word does not mean you're talking about the same thing. And this is one of the problems that I see over and over and over in the book, the immortality key. That because Christianity is talking about eternal life, because Christianity is talking about wine, for example, much of his argument is that Christ is a sort of Dionysian figure. Dionysius is the god of intoxication. He's sort of the wine god in the ancient Greek mythology. And so for the ancient Greeks, to be drunk is to be filled with the spirit of Dionysius. And of course, we call alcohol spirits, right? There's different types of spirits that you drink. I, again, have to point out that it's the word concept fallacy. Just because Christianity is talking about eternal life and immortality doesn't mean that it's the same thing, or it's talking about the same a mystery initiation as these ancient rites. You have to have a little context. You have to have a little sophistication. And the problem that I see over and over again is nobody knows the difference between an Orthodox Christian worldview and a Gnostic, perennialistic, divine simplicity worldview. And so this whole argument then, whether it be Carl A.P. Ruck, where in this book it is The Apples of Apollo, Pagan and Christian Mysteries of the Eucharist, where and we're going to dive into this right here. You can see this is a famous work. I'm talking about this graph right here. This is by Jakob Burma. Jakob Burma is the famous alchemist, the Gnostic within Northern Europe. And you can see right there where the heart and the cross meet is a sort of mushroom, right? There's a heart and there's a cross right here. You can see the mushroom. And so there's a whole then hermeneutic and exegesis that they present here on why this is related to this ancient mystery. Scholars that present this information, unfortunately, always want to make the claim that they are basically debunking Christianity, that they are undermining and revealing the true purpose of Christianity. Instead of, at the same time, they recognize that Gnostic traditions, and that's where we're going to be diving into, because that's the basis of my argument, and this is where I'm trying to really take a different approach than a lot of these other scholars. Yes, Brian Marescu talks about Gnostic Gospels, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Yes, Carl A.P. Ruck talks about Gnosticism, but for some reason, because Gnosticism is known to have used inebriating substances in their pursuit of quote-unquote gnosis, the pursuit of an ecstatic state of knowledge, which then connects back to shamanism itself, archaic techniques of ecstasy, the famous book by Marceli Eliade, where he's talking about that the point of the shaman in the way that they get into their magical state is to get into ecstatic states of experience, of which drugs, now he calls narcotic shamanism a sort of form of decadent, but he actually takes that back later in his career because he realizes that psychedelic shamanism is actually the sort of sine qua non of shamanism. The majority of shamanism uses some type of inebriating substance. It's not just ordeal traumas where they do sun dances for hours to get into an altered state of quote-unquote ecstasy. So the problem that I see is a lot of these scholars, when they come and approach this topic in this work, is that they're all using a perennialistic framework, that somehow because Gnosticism did it, that must mean that the true basis of Christianity is related to it, and that they want to debunk Christianity. And because they want to debunk Christianity, because none of these scholars are Christian, it blinds them. It blinds them to the fact, to the presuppositions, to the hermeneutics they're bringing to the project. Right? And so, and that was one of the big things that I noticed with the immortality key, that Brian Murarescu, he even claims that he's never done psychedelics, that his whole basis is that because of Roland Griffith's most recent research at, I think it's at Johns Hopkins, that because they did recent clinical research with psilocybin and people experienced a sort of death and rebirth, that because psychedelics are associated with the ego death, you can go back to Terence McKenna, you can go back to Timothy Leary, you can go back to Aldous Huxley in the Doors of Perception, Heaven and Hell, his works talking about this birth, this death and rebirth, because psychedelics are associated with this egoic death and rebirth experience, that must be then the basis of Christianity and what Christ means by dying and resurrecting. And so because they want to debunk Christianity, I think it's blinded them to some of the preconceptions that they bring to the table. And so I saw in a few of the works of Carl A.P. Ruck, he makes reference to some of this stuff occurring in Byzantium, which has never followed by a specific instance of it actually being within Byzantium. And one of the things that, if this whole thing is true, again, I'm going to get into then my argument here because I haven't even touched on that, but if the argument that a lot of these scholars bring is true, that the real basis of Christianity is that the Eucharist is really a psychedelic substance, and that the Eucharist that actually merges you with the God, whether that be Dionysius or whether that be a Mithraic archetype, because we know the Mithraic mysteries used inebriating substances like Haoma, like Pagam and Harmala, even in Rome, that must be what Christianity is. But if that is true, why wouldn't the majority of this stuff be presented in the East? Because if even based on their own research, again, R. Gordon Wasson and his wife Valentina Pavlovna wrote a book called Mushrooms, Russia, and History. And in that book, it talks about how the Slavic people are unique in the ways in which they relate to mushroom picking, and mushroom culture. And that out of all the people, Russians, Slavics, have a very unique relationship. If that's the case, why then isn't this stuff present within Orthodox icons like it is with Western Christian frescoes in a particular period? And this is the blind spot, is that Carl A.P. Ruck will reference that a lot of these practices got brought into the West through, for example, the Knights Templar. And the Knights Templar are these crusading Christians that go back to the Holy Land, where they encounter a lot of these Gnostic practices, the Manichaeans being one example. We're going to dive into more reading and description of the Manichaeans. They were known to eat mushrooms. They were known to eat red mushrooms. Could that be the Amanita muscaria mushroom? Very likely, very much a potential. And so that's why then when we look at all these churches, whether it be St. Martin Devick in France, Plain Corault in France, St. Michael's Church in Hildesheim, Germany, the Baptistery in Parma, it's all between a particular framework. It's between the 11th century and the 13th century. All these frescoes that we see are within a contextualized historical framework, showing that all this stuff got brought in at a particular point. Eventually, it gets squashed during the Inquisition, and that's where the Knights Templar, these Gnostic heresies, then go underground and reemerge in what we would call Freemasonry. And that's why Freemasonry, in a book like this, Alchemically Stone, it will tell you all this stuff. It will tell you how so much of the psychedelic relationships and mysteries within Freemasonry come from, again, the Alicinian mysteries. And we even have a direct citation from Tertullian himself, the Latin apologist of the Christian faith, talking about how these Gnostics were directly getting some of their rights from the Eleusinian mysteries. And so let's just say then that their thesis is true, and that there is a psychedelic beverage, the Kakekion and Eleusis. In their own works, they're telling you that Tertullian had cited that they were a continuation of these practices. It's more likely than the fact that Christianity is some great conspiracy, that they were the original Eucharist was really just some sort of psychedelic happening. It's more likely that Orthodox Christianity is in fact trying to differentiate itself from the Gnostic schools, the Valentinian school, the Sethian school, the Ophites, all these different schools of Gnosticism, to establish authentic Orthodox theology, and that these Gnostic heresies continued these psychedelic practices, eventually brought them into, and yes, we'll look at was it Paulinianism, which gets that was in Armenia. So Armenia was a place for one of these Gnostic schools that was practicing these potential psychedelic mysteries, and that would have been quote unquote in the East. We see some of them be in Bulgaria, quote unquote, in the East, but it's never Orthodox Christianity. It's never Orthodox Christianity that's doing this stuff. And so I want to then highlight that one of the things that is never talked about by these scholars is the paradigmatic break. That the Orthodoxy and Gnosticism are not complementary. They aren't just different variations of the Christian faith, that they are fundamental differences at a paradigmatic level, because none of the scholars who engage in this research know what Orthodox theology is. And this is one of the reasons why, as I write my research and do some of this stuff, it really it really feels like this is almost providential, that I'm somehow my journey back to Orthodoxy, it's like I'm supposed to be in this position to then present this information in a new way, in a new light that has yet to have been encountered. And so one of the fundamental things, and I've talked about this before with Jacques Derrida, the father of deconstructionism, in philosophical schools, he talks about phallogocentrism, and I have a few of his books talking about the privileging of the masculine, the privileging of the logos, and that forming this sort of centristic worldview. And even within this book, we see Karl A.P. Ruck refer to the church fathers as misogynistic, because within the Gnostic framework, well, women are already elevated to different degrees. And because Paul, he considers misogynistic, because Paul doesn't allow women to lead men in regards to liturgical services, in regards to preaching, in regards to church, that somehow this is a form of misogyny, and again, divorced of why that would be the case theologically, presenting then coming at it from a feminist contemporary framework. And so this is a paradigmatic break. Orthodoxy isn't related to these divine simplicity frameworks, whether it be Neoplatonism, whether it be Catholicism, whether it be Islam, that a lot of these scholars believe as they do this research. So because of that, all these different religions must be leading to the same mountaintop, and that if psychedelics are the basis of all religion, then that's what really Christianity is all about. But it goes deeper. It goes deeper than just maybe some used drugs and some didn't. It's a fundamental difference in the worldview. It's a fundamental breakdown in the presuppositions between orthodoxy and Gnosticism, orthodoxy and these mystery traditions. And that's failed to be appreciated in a lot of the scholarship. And so how is one deified? This is something that is talked about in here, the immortality key. It's talked about in some of Karl A.P. Ruck's scholarship, is that all this stuff is about being deified. And so we're going to read about different kings in Britain and France, wanting to know the secrets of deification, and in turn getting caught up in a lot of these Gnostic mystery rites being represented or repackaged in, say, medieval and then Renaissance Europe. And we know that in Renaissance Europe, that's when a lot of the magical ideas get going. So this is more than just, did some use drugs? It's about apotheosis versus theosis. Deification is a true in Orthodoxy, but also in these ancient mystery rites. But how do you become deified? And in Carl A.P. Ruck's most recent interview with Jordan Peterson, he talks about how, well, really, you just have to understand that you are God, that there is no God outside you, and that this is the fundamental revelation of the psychedelics. And I would say that is one of the presupposition of a lot of the psychedelic spirituality, and that's why it's a fundamental break from orthodoxy. And we're going to read about Gnosticism, how they're engaging in homosexual acts, how they're engaging in the ingestion of semen and menstrual blood, how the Knights Templars were peeing on the cross of Christ, the crucifix, and how we see Satanism. We also see a lot of the things in contemporary psychedelic spirituality, again, the abnormal or aberrant forms of sexual activity present within Gnosticism. And so isn't it more likely that these practices do create and do allow people to sort of fall into these different paradigms? And as that moves through history, that these ancient mystery rites, say like Eleusis, say like Mithras, the Mithraic mysteries, they're kind of squashed, but they're still around the ancient world, that maybe these Gnostic sects around the Mediterranean, around Armenia, around Bulgaria, maybe that they become encountered with, for example, the Knights Templars, and that's where they get a lot of their mythology of the Holy Grail, right? The Knights Templars are seeking the Holy Grail. Well, we're going to look more into this. And so it's more likely that this stuff is a consistent thread. Gnosticism as a separate paradigm of theology, a separate understanding of deification, a separate understanding of gender, a separate understanding of sexuality and morality, is concomitant, existing at the same time as orthodoxy. It's not that Christianity is a psychedelic religion and that it needs to be debunked and figure out that this is what the true basis of Christianity is. That's not it. What it is that it was always there. This spirit has always been here, and this spirit is now present with us in 2021. It's the same Gnostic yearning. It's the same Gnostic spirit. And Gnostics didn't want to procreate. And one of the readings that we're going to read about today, one Gnostic group that if they happened to get a woman pregnant would perform an abortion and eat the fetus. I'm not kidding. And so the Gnostics would engage in all types of sexual activity in the purpose of not copulating, not producing life. Well, this is an antagonistic, this is an oppositional framework to Orthodox Christianity itself. And so it's most likely that Gnosticism gets caught up with the Templars, gets caught up with these Gnostic groups like the Albigensians, the Bogomils, the Cathars, the Ophites, the Valentinians, the Carpocratians, the Borborites. All these groups are Gnostic, Christian Gnostics that exist within the medieval ages, the medieval period, and that gets continued in the magical traditions of alchemy and Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. And that's why even he'll say that a lot of these Templars, they left for Scotland. And we'll see a lot of these same ideas right here in Morals and Dogma, the Scottish Rites in Freemasonry by Albert Pike. Scottish Freemasonry, we see a lot of this stuff right there. Isn't it more likely then that it's not that Christianity is quote unquote at a foundational level of psychedelic? It's more likely that these practices have always existed. And they've continued to exist, and they've existed at a parallel practice along with, quote-unquote, traditional Christianity. And even during the Inquisition, Pope Innocent III, he tries to squash a lot of this stuff out of Europe. That's what the Inquisition is about. And that's the things that you don't hear. That how much of the Inquisition was really about smashing out these Gnostic heretics. And so my argument is that ancient psychedelic mysteries were continued within various Gnostic traditions. The ancient mysteries, whether it be Mithraic mysteries, Homeric mysteries, Hermes, the mysteries of Hermes, the mysteries of Horus, the mysteries of Osiris, the Eleusinian mysteries, that these psychedelic practices were continued within Gnostic traditions. And that's even cited from a reference by Tertullian in his Against Heresies. Now, obviously, we have Irenaeus' famous Against Heresies, but Tertullian wrote his own. And he says that they're the continuation of the Eleusinian mysteries. Ecstatic mystical experience was a way to attain gnosis, secret knowledge. Secret knowledge means about esoteric traditions. The Western esoteric tradition then itself is really rooted within a spirit of Gnosticism. This isn't revolutionary. Scholars have talked about this before. And so Eliade talks about how shamanism, a tradition of apotheosis, is rooted in archaic techniques of ecstasy, of which drugs are a main part. It's a technique. It's a technology. It's a materialistic technology. And that's why when you look at then the theologies of Aldous Huxley, of Timothy Leary, of Terence McKenna in the 20th century, this same sort of Gnostic psychedelic spirit that presents itself in the 20th century, it becomes interwoven with technology itself. I'm talking about electrical, digital technologies, the cybernetic reality we live in now, and how that is still part of this sort of Gnostic yearning. And so it is all a technology, and it's a sort of materialistic spirituality itself. And so orthodoxy, the apostles, Christ, fulfill, yes, the intent of these ancient mystery rites. The idea of immortality, the idea of communing with God, the idea of ingesting God. This is one of the things that he talks about here, is that, within the Dionysian cults, they would get intoxicated as a way to be filled with Dionysius. Or Carl A.P. Ruck will talk about how within the Mithraic mysteries, they would eat a Mithraic Eucharist, the Eucharist of Mithras, and this is how they would become one with Mithras. And that Christ, then the Christian Eucharist, is the exact same thing. Well, maybe it is the same concept, but it's not the same thing. And so orthodoxy, the apostles, and Christ fulfill this intent, this yearning within these ancient mystery rites, but in a new way. Immortality is attained in a new way. Deification is attained in a new way. It's about following Christ. It's about an incredibly moralistic framework. And that's where morality is totally absent in this book. That somehow all you have to do is take drugs to be initiated into the secret mysteries, and now you have, quote unquote, eternity. You are now immortal. This is, again, the ancient elixir of immortality, whether it be the Taoist, whether it be the alchemist. It's the same concept that somehow you can attain eternal life without a moral framework, without a moral works yourself. This is the difference. Theosis is all about following Christ, and to follow Christ is to be moral. The Eucharist itself is not about getting drunk, even though, yes, it is real wine. And this is what he tries to bring up all the time, that, look, the Christians are using real wine. The Christians use real wine in their Eucharist. That must mean that this is the same thing as the Dionysian cults. No, because he never fails to talk about that sobriety is a virtue. Being sober is a virtue. If sober is being a virtue within this particular context, and if there's a Eucharistic tradition, and within that context, sobriety is a virtue, how then can you just word concept fallacy equate it then to this over here? That's not nuanced. That's not really sophisticated in one's scholarship. Yes, they talk about healing, but Christ heals in a different way. They talk about theosis. Our theosis is different. And so orthodoxy, Gnosticism are in opposition. They're not complementary. Gnostic heresies are much more at home in the second Europe. That's where this book right here, Joseph P. Farrell, God, History, and Dialectic. Why is it that the Templars, why is it that Freemasonry, why is it that these perennialistic, these magical worldviews get going at a much higher degree in the West than the East? Could it be based on concepts like divine simplicity? And then why is it that the West continues traditions of the Greco-Roman period, like using statuary as opposed to icons? Why is it that they prefer more naturalistic theology, more naturalistic philosophy? Why is it that the West is more consistent with philosophical dialectics? Because they are the continuation of the Greco-Roman world. This is why all the examples we're going to look at today are in the West. They're not in the East, even though in the East there were Gnostic groups that were there present. Of course there were, but that doesn't equate then Eastern Orthodoxy with the Gnostic heretics. And so when we look at the papacy itself, the Pope is like the reincarnation. It's like the reformation of Caesar himself. It's like the Roman emperor. We can see then Catholicism, and even though somebody like Pope Innocent III tried to squash these psychedelic mysteries, these Gnostic heresies, they're going to find themselves at home in the West as opposed to the East. And so, along with various Gnostic groups, the Paulicians, the Bogomils, the Cathars, the Ophites, the Valentinians, the Copacratians, the Borobites, and the Knights Templars bring these practices back from the Holy Land. All these examples are consistent with the dates of the frescoes that we're going to look at. And as the Inquisition heats up, these practices are going to go underground and they're going to reemerge within the traditions of Freemasonry. And that's what our Freemasonic friend here, P.D. Newman, will literally tell us. And then he'll even cite then Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma to give reference to these things. And so when we look at examples like the Rosalind Chapel, because the Rosalind Chapel has this image of the green man, and in him, he has a anatomically correct Amanita muscaria mushroom upside down on his forehead. I don't doubt that is an Amanita muscaria mushroom. The difference is we're literally told in their own research that the Templars and many of these Gnostics make their way up to Britain, make their way up to Scotland. No wonder then when we look at the Psalter of Canterbury, when we look at Rosalind Chapel, that these things exist there in the 16th century, in the 15th century, because they had to go underground and they reemerged at a later date. And so that's what we're going to be getting into today. I'm going to go through this stuff systematically one by one. Please smash that like if you guys can. Also, like I said, you're not going to get today's stream anywhere else on the internet. This is all a sort of unique approach that I'm going to be bringing to you guys. Please smash that like. Please, if you like what I'm doing here at Church of the Eternal Logos and you like to show support, please do so using the Streamlabs link. I would greatly appreciate you throwing some super chats. Also, if you would like to become a website member, that is another way you could help. I just posted a new members-only video, so if you guys are members, make sure to check out the video after tonight's stream. Go over to the website and check out the new video. It is on the spiritual war on the body, and I talk a little bit about the metaverse. I talk a little bit about the stabbies. I talk a little bit about the attack on aesthetics and health, and how this is really a larger, at a spiritual level, an attack on the incarnation of Christ himself. I got a lot of fun videos, one on Will Smith being a beta. I got videos on psychedelic experiences, going to Gnostic masses, my Montana event, my trad forum. You can get all that stuff over at the website. Just become a website member. Also, if anybody would like to sign up for a one-on-one session, you'd like to talk about any topic, whether it be religious mysticism, theology, philosophy, goal setting, fitness, any of that stuff, please sign up using the link that I just posted here in the live chat. Click that, and I would greatly appreciate anybody signing up for a one-on-one session. We could do that. Also, guys, we have sign up for the book club. Our book club is going to be meeting this coming Tuesday. You can have access to the PDF file right there just by purchasing access to the book club and just catch up with us to chapter 12. And so, yeah, but that being said, guys, we can dive into, again, this stream. Please support, guys. Like I said, this is unique research. You're not going to find this anywhere else on the internet. Okay. So, now let me dive into some of these examples here. So the first one that I want to show you guys is the Plain Corult Chapel. Now, I already showed you this one, but let me pull up then the Wikipedia page. So let me throw this over here. We'll throw this over here, and then we'll go, bam. So Plain Corult Chapel. Okay. So we see here that Plain Corult is a 12th century chapel of the Knights Hospitaller in Indre, France. So Indre, France is also going to be the place where we're going to see another chapel in St. Michael de Vic. And so St. Michael de Vic is going to be another example of psychedelic mushroom fresco use. And so what do we see here? 12th century. We see it in plain Corot, 12th century, and it's related to the Knights Hospitaller. And we'll even see today discussions about this particular symbol right here, this particular flag right here, related to the Order of the Knights Hospitaller. Again, on all these would eventually become these secret Masonic groups in Northern Europe. And so what we see then at this particular church, this is a structure which is located next to the Château de Plaincourt, suffered extensive damage during the French Revolution and was abandoned in 1793. It was declared a historical monument in 1944, but was not restored until the Parc Naturel Régional de la Brenne took ownership of the property in 1994. And so we'll see that this chapel is famous for its unusual Romanesque art, particularly its Christian frescoes. But it's this particular Christian fresco that I got up right here that is of notable, of particular note. So here, I'll show you. If you just do a little image search here of plain Corot, this is what you'll see. So you can see this is a very, very large fresco. And what is it doing? It's depicting, here's a good image of you can see a little bit of better definition there. It's depicting Adam and Eve, the original sin, and a serpent on the tree. Now, tied to all this Gnostic theology, now for those of you who don't know, Gnosticism at a general level, Gnosticism, now I'm going to do a stream next week on the Gospel of Philip, diving into Gnostic theology. Gnosticism has a totally different worldview than Orthodox Christianity. In a general framework, and Gnosticism is very diverse. It's hard to just, people want to generalize Gnosticism. It's more diverse than people want to admit. That Gnosticism, generally speaking, believed that the deity of the Old Testament, what they called Yadaboeth, Beelzebub, the Archon, is the devil. It is the enemy of the light within mankind, the divine light. And so Gnosticism is an incredibly dualistic framework, and this is where it's going to find many similarities with a tradition like Manichaeanism. That it's incredibly dualistic, where it believes that we are trapped in a spiritual war of good and bad, and they are battling it out. And in the Gnostic worldview, the fact that you and I are human is a tragedy. That what that means is that our light, our divine light that goes back to the pleroma, goes back to the sphere beyond creation, is trapped in a world created by this bastard child, this Yadaboeth. And the idea is that Sophia, the goddess of wisdom, Sophia gave birth to this sort of distorted deity, this distorted figure. This is the figure that created our world. And that's why there's death, and there's tragedy, and there's pain, and there's, and that's why we have to go to the bathroom, and we have to do all these different things. The way that they explain this in the Gnostic worldview is that this is because the God of the Old Testament was the evil one, and that Christ then was the fulfillment of that light, that transcendent light, and he is the messenger that is brought here into this world to save us. And so when the Gnostic worldview, they venerated Eve. Eve was celebrated for eating the original, the fruit from the tree of knowledge, because the serpent in the Gnostic worldview is Christ. This is important to understand, and this is one of the reasons when we look at the Ophites, when they performed their Eucharistic tradition, they would take a serpent and have it lick the bread, lick the host, because they believed the serpent was Christ. You can see a dramatically paradigmatic difference from an Orthodox Christian worldview, but this was Gnostic theology. And so here we see a what appears to be a mushroom tree, what appears to be, based on the white speckles on the red mushroom, could this be an Amanita muscaria mushroom? Well, it certainly looks like it. And so in the Gnostic tradition, they celebrated the serpent and they celebrated Eve. And we'll see this depiction, and I'm sure you probably saw a little bit of it even within the thumbnail of today's stream, of Eve eating what appeared to be a mushroom, and then behind them is this big Amanita muscaria, looks like a mushroom cap. And so the first one here, this is plain Corot. And like I said, this is what the church looks like. It, again, was heavily damaged during the French Revolution. It's been somewhat restored, but it has a Romanesque church. And we're going to see this Romanesque style reappear over and over and over again. And so the next one that I want to show you guys is St. Martin Devick. And so St. Martin Devick, here we go right here. Let me bring this over here. And then actually it would be easier if I just leave this over here and then bring that. Bring this over. Okay. So here, let's go to St. Martin. St. Martin de Vic, France. Oh, gosh, I did that terrible. So you go to St. Martin de Vic, France, and inside this church right here, again, you can see all these different frescoes, all these different paintings, right? You can see all these different frescoes. Well, interestingly enough, when we look at this one that I have on the upper left screen, this is Christ entering Jerusalem. So this is on him riding the ass back into Jerusalem, and you see him being presented with what appears to be a very mushroom-like stem. The stems from this, what is it, a mushroom tree? It's hard to tell. Again, this is in Indre, France. This is in the same department, is what they call them in France, or the same province, the same state, if you will, in France. The same one as Plain Corot, where we saw by the Hospitallers, we see the similar frescoes here. And so let me go to St. Martin. Gosh, I can't type. So we can go here and see this is reference to this church. Okay. Another 12th century. So the 1100s, again, at the same time that we're going to see these Gnostic heresies and the Knights Templar come back from the Crusades, the Knights Hospitallers, like we saw in Plain Corot, coming back from the Crusades. And so let me show you more of these images. So this is Christ entering Jerusalem, and you can see, I'm going to make it real large real quick. You can see it looks like he's handing the stems of what appears to be almost another mushroom tree. Okay, well, maybe that's not a mushroom. Okay, well, here's the next one. This is called the Towers of Jerusalem. What we're seeing, the left image here, we're seeing two images next to each other, but the left one particularly with the man, he has what appears to be a knife, right? And he's cutting down what looked like the mushroom tree in the previous one when we saw Christ enter Jerusalem. And he has a particular knife. And you can see to the right then pieces of what appears to be that mushroom with those same types of knives. Right there on the table. And so then that is what relates to this image of the Last Supper. When we look at the Last Supper, this is at St. Martin de Vic, France, a church in France, that we see the depiction of the Last Supper, and we see what appears to be little pieces of mushrooms or something related to whatever this plant is that this guy is cutting down in reference to the Towers of Jerusalem. Do you guys see that? And so this would insinuate that was this another example of the use of psychedelic or some type of reference to psychedelic substances? It appears so, to some degree. It appears so. And so this, like I said, is in France, in the same part of France where the Plain Corot Chapel was found. And so this is St. Martin de Vic. And so now I will cover that up. And again, you guys can see a little bit of the church, right? This is some of the other frescoes inside this Romanesque style church. You can see what it looks like. And so then you can see right there the Last Supper and what that looks like. You can see the Last Supper up there. Here, I can even zoom in on it. You see that? So right there where we were looking at Jesus entering Jerusalem, right? Jesus entering Jerusalem. To the far left of this image, you can see the horse that he's sitting on with the man handing him what appears to be these mushrooms. And then you follow that around to the next corner. You see the man with a knife, what appears to be cutting these mushrooms down. And then you follow that to the next scene. And then in the next scene, then you have the Last Supper, where you see the same knives of the guy in the towers of Jerusalem and what appears to be pieces of the mushroom on the table, insinuating that there's a psychedelic Eucharist here. This is obviously part of these Gnostic heresies. Okay, so next one, we're going to go to St. Michael's Church in Hildesheim, Germany. St. Michael's Church in Hildesheim, Germany. And so here we go, St. Michael's Church, Hildesheim, Germany. Again, another Roman-esque church in Hildesheim, Germany. It has been part of the UNESCO. And so this is all going to be tied to this famous Bishop Bernward of Hildesheim. Built a Benedictine monastery from the ground up on a hill linked to the Archangel Michael. And yada, yada, yada. Okay, so what do we see here? Well, at Hildesheim, Germany, and this is what it looks like. Let me see if I can find. So there's a huge this is what the ceiling is. So when you walk into the church, that's what the ceiling looks like. And so you see what's called the Tree of Jesse. The Tree of Jesse. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Tree of Jesse. The Tree of Jesse is related to the genealogy of Christ. Okay? And so the Tree of Jesse is a depiction in art of the ancestors of Jesus Christ, shown in a branching tree which rises from Jesse of Bethlehem, the father of King David. It is the original use of the family tree as a schematic representation of genealogy. The Tree of Jesse originates in a passage of the biblical book of Isaiah, which describes metaphorically the descent of the Messiah, as is accepted by Christians in referring to Jesus. The various figures depicted in this lineage of Jesus are drawn from those listed in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke. Okay, and so what we see in St. Michael's Church in Hildesheim, this is what the church looks like. Again, if you go inside, then This is what the inside of the church, you see the Jesse tree, the Tree of Jesse. And at the very bottom of the Tree of Jesse, what we see is what appears to be a sort of Amanita muscaria mushroom. And so right above him is then Jesse of Bethlehem, right? We see Jesse of Bethlehem right above him. And so let's zoom in then on that particular there. So now we see what appears to be Adam and Eve, just like we saw in Plain Carult, with the serpent wrapped around this tree, and behind them what appears to be the Amanita muscaria mushroom. And so for those of you who don't know the Amanita, this is what the Amanita muscaria mushroom looks like. It's very unique in mycology. It's very unique in the world of mycology. There aren't many like them. Exactly. So I thank you, 303, tag 303. There's not a whole lot like them. And so what we see is what appears to be Adam and Eve standing in front of an Amanita muscaria cap. And then when you look further into it, it looks like what they're doing is Adam is handing it to Eve. Eve is like looking at one of the white dots of the Amanita cap. And then you see the serpent wrapped around the tree. Same thing. And so this is clearly what appeared to be a reference to Amanita muscaria mushrooms. But that's not the only thing, because when you put in Bernward column, you get this right here. You get this huge column here. And when you zoom in, you can see these little, looks like mushroom trees here. And according to a mycologist, and I'm getting this, so let me cite where I'm getting this. I'm getting this from this book right here, The Psychedelic Gospels by Jerry and Julie Brown. According to them, when they went to go take photos of the Bernward column, and right here is a specific example, when they went to go see this, a mycologist told them that this is representative of a particular psilocybin mushroom that is indigenous to Germany. That's according to, again, Jerry and Julie Brown, who went to Germany to take photographs of this column. And so that makes then two references to these mushrooms, because not only does a professional mycologist claim that the mushrooms depicted on this Bernard of the Bishop of Hildesheim, but we see this Amanita muscaria reference here. And so we see then that the whole Jesse tree, this is what it looks like up on the ceiling, and it goes from the original sin of this Amanita muscaria all the way to the fulfillment of Christ as the Alpha and the Omega. But you can also go to, it's not just this Bernward column. It's also, if you put in Bernward doors, these famous doors that are there, here you go. You'll find more what appears to be these, again, a similar type of mushroom tree, a mushroom tree reference. You can see them in some of the different depictions of these little, I don't know, sections of this doorway. So again, some of it is like skeptical. You're like, well, that could just be a palm tree. That could just be a sort of artistic depiction. Maybe so, but I would say with the professional mycologist saying this is indicative of a local indigenous psilocybin type mushroom that grows specifically in Germany, and then we can look back at Bishop Bernward of Hildesheim, who built the church. Right, this is him right here. So Bernward of Hildesheim, the Bishop of Hildesheim, from 993 until his death in 1022, was he aware of some of these Gnostic mysteries? Maybe so. And so even Bernward, he was the tutor at the imperial cult, and was shortly afterwards appointed by the Empress Regent Theophano, tutor of her son Otto III, then 6 years of age. And so this guy was of interest. This is Bernward of Hildesheim right here. There he's with his mitre hat. But we notice that, again, it's associated with Western Christianity specifically. Okay, now we can go to, again, this is what it looks like, the entire thing here. You can see the entire tree. Okay, and then we have the Psalter of Canterbury. This is another reference out of this book right here, the Psychedelic Gospels. And guys, mind you that the St. Michael's Church was built in the 11th century. So we saw both of our examples. The first example, Plaincourt, 12th century. The second example, St. Martin Devick Church in France, 12th century. We see our third example of St. Michael's Church, 11th century, built in the 11th century. Here's the Psalter of Canterbury, which really gets going much later, because if you put in the Psalter of Canterbury, Great Psalter of Canterbury is an early 13th to mid 14th century illuminated manuscript. Now, why does that make sense to me? Because these practices, these Gnostic heresies, get going in the South. If you read the book Mushrooms, Russia, and History, R. Gordon Wasson and his wife Valentina Pavlova make the case that outside of the Slavics, the people who have the language have the most use of psychedelics are the Italians and the French. The Italians and the French have tons of terms for mushrooms. And the Psalter of Canterbury, so it makes sense then once the Gnostic heresies through the Inquisition get squashed, they make their way north, even according to this book right here. As they make their way north, it makes sense then something like the Psalter of Canterbury would have a weird depiction of God creating plants. See, if you look at the very top left, the third frame there. So again, if I go, let's see here. As you see here, this is the depiction of the Psalter of Canterbury. You can see a better image right here. Strange depiction of plants. Strange depiction of plants in this third section here. This is again why the Psychedelic Gospels claim that this is really related to. This is a depiction of psychedelic mushrooms. Now, okay, very much possible. What else do we see in Britain? Well, you can look further in the Rosslyn Chapel, and you see this. Rosslyn Chapel, and this is a depiction of the Green Man. And the Green Man has, you can see upside down, what appears to be an anatomically correct Amanita muscaria mushroom. Rosslyn Chapel, right here. And so this is in Scotland. In Scotland, wow. Where are we going to find that all the Templars go after they get squashed? They tend to go to Scotland. Look, let me read this to you right here. This is by their own research. And so it says, talking about the Knights Templar, as mentioned before, were accused of urinating on the crucifix and of obscene sexual rituals of initiation. A grave of a Templar in Germany has revealed that the knight was buried with one of the Ophite talismanic seals. Well, what are the Ophites? This is the Ophites. This is a Gnostic group. Again, we're a Gnostic Christian sect depicted by Hippolytus of Rome and a lost work. Is now thought that later accounts of these Ophites by what they're calling pseudo-Tertullian are dependent in the lost stigmata, yada yada. Anyways, they worship the serpent. And so that's what it's being referred to there about the Ophites, that he was found with an Ophite talismanic seals, although the last of their leaders, meaning the Knights Templars, were executed in 1314, later than all of our examples are actually created. Many escaped and were absorbed into other military knighthoods or fled primarily to Scotland, where their traditions survived in Freemasonry. Aha! And again, I have a whole book here that we can talk about from right here about Freemasonry and its relationship to psychedelics and its relationship to the Knights Templars and all that stuff. So this is in Rosslyn Chapel. This is a depiction of the Green Man. Here is the Baptistery of Parma. So the Baptistery of Parma. Here we go. So this is A religious edifice in Parma, northern Italy. Architecturally, the Baptistery of Parma Cathedral marks a transition between the Romanesque and Gothic styles and is considered to be one of the most important medieval monuments in Europe. One of the most important. When was it built? 1196. 1196, totally within our window, talking about the Crusades and whatnot. And so what do we see at the Baptistery of Parma other than look at the Transfiguration of Christ? The Transfiguration of Christ right here. Look at this. Very interesting depiction of the Transfiguration of Christ. I've seen a lot of icons depicting the Transfiguration of Christ. I have never seen it look like this. And so what is it? It's Christ, what appears to be in front of another Amanita Muscaria depiction with one foot on the holy chalice. And why is that significant? Because if you read this book, Persephone's Quest by R. Gordon Wasson, and has a bunch of other contributing, Carl A.P. Ruck, Jonathan Ott, Stella Cromrish, that in it, R. Gordon Wasson has a whole discussion on psychedelic mushroom use in Mexico and how they call mushrooms the one-footed beings. The one-footed beings because they would eat the mushrooms and they would consider them animate. And so because of that, Carl A.P. Ruck then is citing R. Gordon Wasson's discussion of these one-footed entities and how here we see only 1 foot of Christ on the Holy Grail. Is that insinuating that the Holy Grail, again, what I'm claiming is part of the Knights Templar, part of these ancient Gnostic traditions, is related to the one-footed being, the mushrooms or psychedelic inebriants like mushrooms, that this is really the mystery of the Holy Grail? Is that what is being insinuated here? Well, it very much could be. It very much could be. So this is, and then so you'll see it again now on the wall. You'll see what appears to be the Amanita Muscaria mushroom with the Transfiguration of Christ in front of it. And so this is what the Baptistery of the Parma of Italy looks like. Now, another really interesting thing about the Baptistery of Parma is that on one of the doorways entering into the baptistry, you have a depiction of Mithras. And Mithras, as we know, again, has a bunch of ancient rites related to psychedelics and inebriating substances. And so, in fact, this is what's above the doorway when you go in. Can you see that it's Mithras cutting the head of the bull? This, I forget which doorway it is, but it's over one of the doorways to the Baptistery of Parma. So the Baptistery of Parma not only has what appears to be an Amanita Muscaria cap. Again, we can look at that again right there. Not only does it have that, but on one of the doorways, it has a direct reference. This is supposed to be a Christian building, but it has a reference to Mithras because we know that the Mithraic mysteries were still prominent in Rome. These were underground things. And we can see this is the front of the Affluence of Deity, this book right here by Carl A.P. Ruck. And then at the ceiling of the Baptistery of Parma, you see, again, according to Carl A.P. Ruck, all the lines within the building, all the frescoes, all the walls lead to the very top of the baptistry, which he claims is another Amanita Muscaria cap, this red circle, because it's not the Pantocrator. It's not a depiction of Christ. Instead, it's a depiction of this red. Is it the sun? Is it the sun? Carl A.P. Ruck claims it's a reference to the Amanita Muscaria mushroom. Who knows? And so, again, if you want to see what this is what the Baptistery of Parma looks like. So then you can see the frescoes on the walls here, and then all the walls kind of take your eye and they lead you up to the top here, which Carl A.P. Ruck claims this is another reference to the Amanita. Maybe so. I'm not sure. Maybe so. Okay, so what else we got? So also then we have we have, this is another, and so when was the Baptistery of Parma? Again, 12th century. So the ages of all our references, 12th century, 12th century, 11th century, 12th century, and then we see the Roslin Chapel, 16th century, and then 14th century in regards to the Psalter of Canterbury, which would be after the Knights Templar and a lot of these Gnostic heretics gets pushed to the north. Now, one of the references, and I can read this for you in this book. I forget which one was better. I think maybe it was this one. Here we go. I'll read this. So check this out. This is Jakob Burma. Okay, so notice right in the center there where the cross and the heart meet, you see what appears to be a mushroom reference. This is what Carl A.P. Ruck writes about this. A classic example is the 17th century theosophist Jakob Burma, drawing of the Christi Testamenta, the Testaments of Christ, Amsterdam, 1682, where the mushroom goes unnoticed at the center of the bleeding heart, superimposed upon the radiant luminous Tau cross. And he has a whole section talking about the Tau cross is related back to the Knights Templar and how they would force people to kiss the Tau cross and during their initiation rites. The image represents Burma's meditation upon John 15:1-8, I am the true vine, and is a Christianized version of the Sephiroth, the tree of life of the Kabbalah. The cross itself is rooted in the earth and growing amidst flames upwards as a tree, with two lateral branches bearing additional smaller hearts on either side of fruits, each receiving a stream of blood pouring in an arc from the aorta at the top of the unnoticed mushroom. The arcs define an additional mushroom cap, with the tree trunk as stripe. Each of these apple fruit bears has an embodied disembodied visionary eye. An additional heart of equal size to the one of the mushroom, but oriented upwards, is placed at the base of the tree. Both hearts are further defined by opposing isosceles triangles like arrows, converging upon the dove of the Annunciation, midpoint on the trunk of the tree. The fruit hearts are at the same level on either side of the dove, and they too are winged as birds. The branches, moreover, are parallel to the spread of wings of the Annunciation dove. One heart has closed its eye and folded its wing. The other is open and weeping a single tear as it spreads its wings for flight. This branch, in distinction of the other, which is barren, with the closed eye heart, is sprouting with leaves. The document of the Testaments is seen in the upper left. It is sealed. One would have to break its seal to read its message. One seal bears the image of the Eucharistic Grail, the other the inverted triangle, one of these superimposed upon the mushroom heart. Burma's writing had a profound influence upon the mystical or theosophic development of Freemasonry, and influenced Mozart's intention in his Magic Flute, which parodies Masonic themes. The theosophical element in Freemasonry is traceable back at least to the 14th century and the intense interest in Kabbalah as encoding ancient secrets, but has purportedly become largely obsolete in the rituals as practiced today. Such alchemical puzzles were termed a rubus, a message encoded with images from the Latin ablative plural for res, thing, object, indicating that the message is conveyed through the instrument of objects. Need we ask what he be saying? And so this is Jakob Burma. Okay, and then the last one that I want to show you is, and this one's a little bit tougher. This is a statue of St. George. And so the Knights Templar had a whole thing about St. George and him defeating the dragon and how they tied this back to the Gorgon legend within Greek mythology. And this relating to the Gorgon's blood, the dragon's blood, having a sort of psychedelic property. Guys, smash that like if you guys can. Please smash that like. I would greatly appreciate it. And so in the book, The Psychedelic Gospels, Jerry and Julie Brown claim that if you look at the bottom here, they almost looks like mushroom-like references. So on the underneath the dragon, and it's hard to tell with the image that I have. I was trying to find. Let me see here. Let me see if I can find another one. This is at the Prague Castle. So St. George statue, Prague Castle. See, this is it right here. And if you look at the base, look at the base of the it looks like, at least it's claimed that this double-headed dragon, that there are Amanita muscaria mushrooms. You see these weird little mushroom-like things underneath the dragon? See, there's a few of them. This is, oh, you can't see it. Hold on. Let me, screen capture. So do you guys see what I'm showing here? That underneath the dragon, according to the Psychedelic Gospels, they're claiming that there are these mushroom-like structures. Do you see all around the double-headed dragon? Do you see those? I hope you guys see those. So, again, this is here from this particular book, the Psychedelic Gospels. Now, I want to talk to you guys about what some of these Gnostics were doing. Okay, I kind of had enough with these. So now what I want to do is read to you a section on these Gnostic heresies and what some of these Gnostic groups were doing. So you can see a radical, fundamental break from Orthodox theology. Okay, so what we're going to read here is on the heretical Eucharist. The heretical Eucharist in this book, The Affluence of Deity, Alchemy and Psychoactive Sacraments in Medieval and Renaissance Art. And so I'm going to read this whole thing to you guys because I think it's really important and really interesting. Without any of the canonic scriptures yet in place, again, so remember, this is coming from somebody who is non-Christian and who's trying to debunk Christianity as a psychedelic religion. So I guess I can stop and try to correct things that I think are totally fallacious or out of line, but follow me here because you're going to see some of the stuff he talks about regarding these Gnostic groups. Again, eating menstrual blood, eating semen, again, trying to have sex, even homosexual sex, but not create life. And when they did create life, they would eat the fetus. I'm not kidding. So listen to this. Without any of the canonic scriptures yet in place and with no central control of the cult, charismatic evangelists, who were later repudiated as heretics by the church that Paul largely is responsible defining. Again, you can already see the negative connotations of orthodoxy or the church that Paul defined. Promulgated many versions of the Agape. Hippolytus of Rome, who himself fell foul to the church and was a rival to the Pope as the second bishop of Rome, and his refutation of all heresies traced their origin to the Ophites, an Egyptian Gnostic sect named for the ophis or snake, and probably similar to a group labeled the Sethians. And so here, let me pull some of this stuff up. Here's the Ophites. The Sethians, for the ass-headed brother of Osiris, who honored the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and hence were the origin of the tradition that would survive into the medieval age as the doctrine of the Felix Culpa. In their celebration of the Eucharist, it is reported that they caused a serpent to lick the bread. To lick the bread so as to impart the essence, again, because they're worshiping Christ as a serpent. This is part of the Gnostic theology. They believe Christ was a serpent, okay? So they would cause a serpent to lick the bread so as to impart its essence on the host and even extend the fraternal kiss to the holy reptile. As with all these heresies, the accounts are very confused and obscure and not in the least unbiased, but is probably significant with their founder with a certain Euphrates, like the Mesopotamian river, who is regarded as the name of the mystical water of life, aqua vitae, that flows from Jacob's well in John 4:10. Hippolytus claimed that the sect derived from James, the brother of Jesus, which is I don't believe that, passed on to Magdalene, and we have within this book there's another, the Church of Mary Magdalene literally shows another representation of mushrooms. Okay. They also were adepts at codifying their doctrine as a tablet and in forming of talismanic images, some of which survived until Byzantine times and came into the possession of crusaders and pilgrims. Okay, exactly my point. You see, some of these Gnostic things came into the possession of the crusading pilgrims. Versions of heresy, moreover, still existed in Armenia and Syria. The Valentinians took their name from Valentinus, who also parted from the church when he was passed over for bishop. He is considered an offshoot of the Ophites. He claimed to have received a certain Theodos, the secret occult teachings that Paul divulged only to his inner circle, derived from the visionary encounter with Christ, of which he boasted in 2 Corinthians. Now, again, I don't believe Paul had an esoteric teaching that he passed on, and that the Valentinian school, they would claim these things just to have a sort of weight, just to have a sort of notoriety amongst each other. Guys, smash that like if you can. I really appreciate it. Okay, the areta remata are not, quote, unspeakable words, but words that are important at the initiation. As in most secret societies, Paul seems to have reserved this for a certain elite within the Corinthian congregation. No, he didn't have a secret society. You see, this is a hermeneutic of trying to read in these mystery religions into Orthodox Christianity, while simultaneously promulgating a purely symbolic enactment of the Lord's Supper. And it's not even symbolic. That's not even Orthodox theology. See, that's what I'm saying, is that these scholars, they have no sophistication, even though they are very sophisticated and they know things that I don't know in regards to history and all this stuff. But when it comes to orthodoxy, when it comes to their critiques of Christianity, they don't have a sort of sophistication at looking at Orthodox theology. Orthodox theology doesn't believe the Eucharist is just symbolic, and therefore that if it's not a psychedelic Eucharist, it's not real. The secret Eucharist embodied Adam Kadmon. Again, that gets back to Kabbalah in the original man. It was experienced and ritualized as spiritual possession by the divine light with obvious sexual connotation. That gets back to the cult of Dionysius in Greece, with the recipient identified as the bridal chamber. Marcus, one of the Valentinian charismatics who was responsible for the Marcion heresy, administered the Eucharist wine to wealthy women in such large doses that they became deranged and apparently granted him access to their bridal chamber. The Capocratians were even more explicit. And so let me share that with you guys. So that is a form of Gnosticism that followed this guy Capocrates. There, you guys can check that out. The Capocratians were even more explicit. At the Agape feast, they extinguished the lamps and committed sexual intercourse as a divine duty. A promiscuous orgy. Does that sound like anything related to Orthodoxy or Christianity? Preferably without one's wedded spouse. Now, of course, he's claiming this is all these Gnostic heresies, the heretical Eucharist, which I agree, but I'm saying that it's not like this is somehow just a different variation of the Eucharist. This is an entirely different paradigm and worldview. Preferably without one's wedded spouse. So they would have a promiscuous orgy, preferably without one's wedded spouse. So adultery, both heterosexual and homosexual. And this is where it gets really offensive. Citing Christ's precedent with the boy who ran naked away from Gethsemane without his loincloth after lying body to body with the Lord. What? The Borites may be the same sect pejoratively named generically as the filth eaters, also known by a variety of regional names. They made their Eucharist upon the menses, or collected menstrual blood, and the ejaculated semen from masturbation, or withheld from intercourse. And if perchance the coitus intercourse failed, stopping sex, if that failed, they would consume the aborted fetus from an accidental resulting pregnancy. What? And that's this group right here, the Borborites. The Borborites. So you guys can look all that stuff up yourself if you want. These Gnostic sects saw physical procreation as the sinful encasement of light. In matter, whereas sexual ecstasy without conception was a divine experience. And to this end, they encouraged all forms of coupling, male and female, especially not culminating in successful insemination. Of particular significance is the fact that they equated their filthy Eucharist with the fruit of the tree in Eden. The chorus of derogatory condemnation from the church fathers has now been augmented by the recovery of their banned scriptures in the Nag Hammadi library. Let me move this over. So, the Nag Hammadi library right here, which offer explicit scenarios for such Gnostic orgies or the Eucharistic meal, including a considerably more than fraternal kiss with the Magdalene. The Agape feast was officially banned at the Council of Laodicea, but it was still being celebrated at the time of the Quinisex Council in 692. The 4th century Mosaic floor of the Agape Hall, uncovered beneath the 11th century Basilica of Aquila. Let me show you a photo of that. This is what they're talking about. So he's talking about this image right here, okay? The 4th century Mosaic floor of the Agape Hall, uncovered beneath the 11th century Basilica in Aquila, northern Italy on the Adriatic, indicates that the Eucharist enacted there formerly involved the Amanita Muscaria as the sacred meal. And this is cited from Mushrooms and Snails and Religious Rituals of Early Christians at Aquila by Franco Fabro. Such heresies persisted in Byzantium in the Orient and were repeatedly reinvented under the names of new charismatic evangelists. They spread westward into medieval Europe, where they were persecuted by the Church of Rome as such heretical groups as the Albigensians, named for the French word albi, the Cathars, named as the Puritans, and the Manichaeans. And so, look, the Cathars, let's see here, the Albigensians, this was their Cathar theology. So this was a big one. So the Albigensian Crusade, they went and killed all these people because of their heresies. And so the Cathar theology is an incredibly Gnostic theology. Cathar theology. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Cathars before. Also known as the Albigensians, okay? So those are the Cathars, known as the Puritans and the Manichaeans. They brought with them the filthy sacrament of the divine effluence like urine and the secret fruit of the tree of Abulafia, saw in his ecstatic meditation upon Jacob's journey. Now, Abulafia was a Jew known for his discussions of the Talmud. The last of their leaders were executed in 1310, and their scriptures destroyed, although the religion persisted in remote areas under other names in the 14th and 15th centuries in France and Germany. The charismatic prophet who founded the Manichaean sect was a magus, or Zoroastrian priest named Mani, Latinized as Manichaeus, from the marshlands of the mouth of the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers of Mesopotamia, who died around 272. The cult was syncretic and claimed Buddha and Jesus along with Zoroaster as their prophets. St. Augustine was himself a member of this sect for a while, and he described the Eucharistic meal reserved only for elite as consisting of mushrooms. The cult spread to China, where its night agape feasts, which included magic, drugs, rites of sexual obscenity, were officially banned in China in 732 for the same suspicion of revolutionary political foment that had brought the Christian Eucharist to the attention of the proconsul Pliny. But the religion continued with periods of sporadic resurgence until the early 20th century. And official document of the 12th century complains of their inordinate demand for red mushrooms for their rites, both east and west. They were rebuked, moreover, for their use of urine as a liturgical water. Now, why would the Manichaeans drink their own urine? This is related to Siberian shamanism and the ingestion of Amanita muscaria mushrooms, because the muscimol is a toxin. That's why if you eat Amanita muscaria mushrooms wet, if you're just walking around and you find the red and white mushroom underneath a tree and you eat it, it can kill you. So the red and white mushroom, the Amanita muscaria mushroom, must be dried so you can dry out some of the muscimol. And so one of the ways that you can eat a dried Amanita muscaria mushroom, and then you can drink the urine of yourself, somebody who drank it, and it's going to have all the toxins filtered, and you can still get intoxicated from it. This is why I even have Mike Crowley's book, who talks about Vajrayana Buddhism and the Tibetan tantric form of Buddhism, and he talks about the urine pail that they have, where he believes that they ate Amanita muscaria mushrooms, would pee in this bucket, and so the urine had already filtered the mushroom, and people would drink the urine because it would get them high. This is a known thing in Siberian shamanism. Look up the academic studies on Siberian shamanism and Amanita muscaria mushroom use, and you'll see that Siberian shamans will drink the urine of reindeer, and reindeer will knock people over who they suspect have already drank, who have eaten the Amanita muscaria mushroom. They'll knock them over while they're getting out of their yurt late at night to go pee outside to eat the urinated snow, because reindeer are also known to have consumed the Amanita muscaria mushroom fairly regularly. And then I have the point that I read earlier, that the Knights Templar, as mentioned before, were accused of urinating on the crucifix and of obscene sexual ritual of initiation, just like all these Gnostic sects. A grave in a Templar of a Templar in Germany has revealed that the knight was buried with one of the Ophite talismanic seals. Although the last of their leaders was executed in 1314, many escaped and were absorbed into the military knighthoods or fled primarily to Scotland, where their traditions survived in Freemasonry. And so, let's see here. Do I have anything in particular I want to share with you guys from this book? Let's see. So this is on, again, the 1 foot chalice. That's why when we're looking at Christ standing on 1 foot, this is a discussion on what exactly that means here. Let's see here. The Saint Knights of George. So remember when I was talking to you about this right here? Right? And these potential, the potential of these being mushrooms. And so this is the statue of St. George outside the Prague Castle. Okay, and so here is St. George's reabsorption into the Knights Templars. I gotta drink something. The precedent of those orders of knighthood was the Knights Templar. So this is talking about the Knights of St. George. The design of the cross of St. George, red against the white shield, is very similar to the cross of the Knights Templar, who styled themselves the Soldiers of Christi Militis, spelled with the 2 capital Greek letters XR, Chi Rho. Their full title was Purpuris I'm not good at Latin, so forget that. Fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Solomon Temple, that's what it means. Since they had taken a vow of poverty and headquartered in the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount, built above the ruins of Solomon's Temple. The sponsor of the Templars was Bernard of Clairvaux, who originally commissioned them in 1128, again, right in our time frame. Bernard was canonized as a saint in 1174, but was brought under the banner of St. George. Despite their communal poverty, the order assumed a huge fortune, acting as international bankers, which led to their persecution and of financial decommissioning, and of the physical decommissioning in 1314, about a century before the Ghent altarpiece, yada, yada, yada. And this goes on. Okay. So what else did I want to show you? Okay. Here's a little bit more on the Templars. And so, for those of you who don't know, something true may also lurk among the many false allegations made against the Knight Templars. As Christian knights, they obviously celebrated the Eucharist, but it was common to accuse one's enemies of perverting the Mass to Satanism. Oh, really? Maybe it was like those Gnostic sects that were eating menstrual blood, eating semen, and eating fetuses that were aborted. Sounds pretty satanic to me, which is highly unlikely of these devout, poor fellow soldiers of Christ who hazard their lives to defend the Holy Land and its pilgrims. Their presumed deity was named Baphomet. The Templars' deity was named Baphomet. Are you guys familiar with who Baphomet is? This is Baphomet, the deity of the Satanic Temple. Well, that one's not a good one. Why does he not have breasts? There you go. There's a good one. So let me read that again. This is talking about the Knights Templar. Their presumed deity was named Baphomet, a word that was often disclosed under torture in the Inquisition, presumably indicating their conversion to Muhammad, but more probably a pejorative corruption of the Islamic prophet's name with the Baptists. Images that survive of Templar artifacts from the 13th century, the 1200s, depict the presumed satanic deity hermaphroditic and replete with alchemical symbolism of the lunar-solar conjunction, not unlike the depiction of the lentocephalic, lion-headed god who presided over the end of time in Mithraism. The emblem, probably with special significance, occurs on their chalice. So the Knights Templars' chalice, their holy chalice, had an image of Baphomet. Again, they were accused, talking about the Knights Templar, of peeing on the cross, which is usually seen as a pejorative reference from misunderstood rumors about urine in their Eucharistic ritual, meaning they drunk urine. Worse, however, they were accused of being naked and then raised up as if from the dead to kiss their master obscenely on his private parts. The resurrection from the prone dead position is still practiced symbolically among the Masons, the Freemasons, and its more extreme version is documented from archaeological remains of Mithraism. The Crusades would have had reintroduced into medieval Europe theological elements that had survived in the Byzantine world and had been assimilated by Christian communities in the East. The accusation that the Templars perverted the Mass with an exotic Eucharist indicates as well that exotic forms of the Eucharist were indeed not uncommon among the among the Templars, which employed for sinister goals by witches and other victims of the Inquisition. So there you have it. That the Baphomet was literally on the holy chalice of that. So then again, talking about the Teutonic Knights that I was just showing you. The Teutonic Knights were a German crusade military order like the Knights Templar. And the Hospitallers, which again, we know that the Hospitallers were the basis for the Plain Curault. Remember Plain Curault? You guys remember? This is Plain Curault. Remember where this image was from? That was a church dedicated by the Hospitallers, formed to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land and tend for the sick, founded in the end of the 12th century. The order survives until the present day. A couple of centuries, yada, yada. Yeah, we don't need any more. Okay. So now I want to read a few things to you guys regarding, so again, how this stuff was brought into Europe. So in these Mithraic traditions, right? In these Mithraic traditions, it talks about how they would ingest a psychedelic sacrament, what they would call, what the author is calling a psychedelic Eucharist. And so he's saying that it would appear that the good friar was privy to the secret of the Heoma, a psychedelic Eucharist. Since he chose to depict his resurrection in this manner, we could recall that the west portal of the nearby Basilica of San Vicente even displays an agaric mushroom as the food of the heavenly banquet. Now, it's really hard to see, and it's in a black and white image up top, so you won't be able to see that. And the martyred namesake for a same Mithroic entombed in the crypt. Even if persecuted and co-opted by Christianity in the West, Mithraism and Manichaeanism and other heresies of their Christianized version with the same similar sacraments, i.e. Gnosticism, continue to thrive in the East and would inevitably be spawned renewed interest in the entheogenic Eucharist by the returning Crusaders, who themselves were devotees of esoteric mystery religions like the Knights Templar, and must have been struck by the similarity of their Christianity with the Eucharistic religion of Mithras. Now, of course, they were adopting these Gnostic heresies, claiming to be the inheritors and preservers of the ancient mysteries via direct lines of descendant going back to at least the time of the Knights Templars. Masonic symbolism does seem to portray a cohesive and accurate synopsis of the ancient mysteries. As Masons, they were metaphorically engaged in building a new world order, and their status as free Masons meant that they acknowledged no feudal overlord. They were then the inheritors of the tradition of the Knights Templar, who were engaged in restoring the old temple. Guys, the Knights Templar went underground, reemerged as the Freemasons, and kept these sort of psychedelic practices. Although the activities of secret societies offer a vast scope for the prurient imagination of outsiders, especially when religion is involved, certain aspects of the charges brought against the Templars suggest that they were perpetuated by the Nymphis grade of the Mithraic initiation. Similarly, although the rites of Freemasonry are performed today in sanitized versions with little or no understanding of their antecedents, the candidate experiences something reminiscent of the mock internment of the Raven grade, or the oculum passus, or the kiss of peace, is supposedly adopted from the ancient Templars. This is from the Templars. Furthermore, in the initiation of our brothers of the aforementioned order, the novice was required to kiss the receiver on the mouth, the navel, the naked belly, and on his anus, or lower spine, sometimes on his male appendage, his penis. So you see, the homosexuality is always replete in these things. It's over and over and over. It's crazy. So here again, right in our window, this would be conveniently early enough for Masons to be involved with the Knights Templars, who were established after the First Crusade and existed approximately from 1118 to 1312 when they fell victim to the Inquisition. Although the title is used as an international philanthropic Masonic order within Freemasonry, there is no evidence connecting them directly to the Knights Templar, just their rituals. It is claimed and also denied that the Inquisition, certain Templars sought refuge in Scotland, with Robert the Bruce bringing them with him what would become the York Rite of Freemasonry. It is true that Bruce appears to have been a Templar sympathizer and even wanted his embalmed heart taken on a crusade to be buried in Jerusalem. If he had supported the fugitive Templars, he would have done so in secret to avoid problems with Rome or King Philip of France, who had instigated the persecution to avoid his debts to the Templars. Supposedly, Sir William Sinclair was himself a Templar, or was initiated into the secret rites. He fought with Robert the Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, supported by Egyptians who may have been gypsies. 150 years later, Sir William, his descendant, built Rosslyn Chapel. Rosslyn Chapel, the same place that we saw the symbolism. Guys, Rosslyn Chapel. Built Rosslyn Chapel near Edinburgh. His ancestor, Henry St. Clair, 1st Earl of Rosslyn, had served on the First Crusade with Hague de Payen, first grade master of the Knights Templar, and Hugh visited Rosslyn in 1126, where he was given the land where the chapel now stands. It is claimed and also denied that Rosslyn is replete with Masonic and Templar symbolism. Built on the plan of Herod's temple, the Sinclairs even claim that they are the lineage of Jesus through his marriage with Mary Magdalene. Again, that's Gnostic theology, right? That somehow Jesus Christ had a romantic relationship with Mary Magdalene. That is Gnostic. The first Grand Lodge of Scotland was formed in 1736 with a William St. Clair of Rosslyn as its Grand Master. All right. I hope you guys are following along. I hope this is still interesting for a lot of you guys, because this is some heady stuff. So now I want to give you guys, I want to read this section on Manichaeanism and some of these ancient Gnostic traditions. So we know of Mani and Manichaeanism. Now let's read a little bit more about it, okay? Let's read a little bit more about it. Okay. So we're talking about Mani and Manichaeanism. Mani was a healer of body and spirit at the court of Shah Shapur I and had journeyed to the land of the Brahmanes, but had fallen out of favor, persecuted by a rival Magus, the high priest. He was put to death by crucifixion and then beheaded. Jesus was one of the cult's prophets, as was Buddha and Zarathustra. Manichaeanism was an ascetic, celibate, vegetarian, communal, visionary cult, synchronistic with the Neo-Pythagoreans, Gnosticism, Brahmanism, and Zoroastrianism, believing in the dualism of darkness and light, of the flesh and spirit, and seeking to liberate the latter from the former through a luminous mystery, which could be accomplished by drinking from a cup. As Mani himself described it, the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete, had instructed him on the mystery of the tree of knowledge, of which Adam ate, and by which his eyes were made to see. In addition to the real existence, according to the opposing force of satanic darkness, the doctrine of the Jesus Patabilis, or sentient Jesus, put it at a variance with the church. In Mani's account, it is Jesus, the personification of light, held captive in all matter, who plays the role of the serpent in paradise. urging Adam. So again, remember, it is in this Gnostic worldview, it's Christ urging Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge, according to this worldview. It's Christ who's the serpent, who hangs from the very tree and is served up, bound in every dish, is every day born, suffers, and dies. Dispersed throughout all creation, his most genuine realm and embodiment is the vegetable world. Talking about this is Jesus. Or again, this is Manichaean theology, because they engaged in the use of inebriating mushrooms. The most passive and innocent form of life. It became a major religion in Western Asia and Eastern Europe, continuing even Augustine for a while amongst its members until its violent repression by Rome. And again, we read earlier that even Augustine said that the Manichaeans are known to eat mushrooms. Until the violent suppression by Rome in the 6th century, the cult was usually accused of sorcery, Manichaeans. It apparently went underground and surfaced again in Armenia in the 7th century as the Paulicianism. So Paulicianism, that's this, guys. Paulicianism. How many of you guys have heard this form of Gnosticism? It existed over in Armenia. And in the 10th century in Bulgaria with Bogomilism. This is another one. The Bulgarian Empire. Bogomilism, and again in southern France during the 11th and 13th centuries as the fraternity of the Albigensians, also known as the Cathars, perhaps through the ideas brought back by the Crusaders and the Cathars. So-called, they were purified by the ancient mystery that you were aware of, but it was again suppressed by Pope Innocent III. Throughout these periods of suppression and renewed heresies, no doubt neo-pagan continuations of classical rites encountered by the Manichaean concept of Satanism persisted as cults of witchcraft and synchronistic with Druidism. It is probably through the widespread and repeatedly resurgent heresy that the tree of knowledge came to be depicted in Africa and Europe as a mushroom tree, sometimes single-capped, more often triple or multiple capped. With the exemplars are viewed together, there can be no doubt that a mushroom, it was depicted, or not a stylized Mediterranean umbrella pine. For one example, Eve has eaten the cap. Nor does the mushroom trees resemble the pine, which stretches its branch upwards and not rounded downwards like a fungal cap. This reopens the whole debate about the role of fungal entheogens in Semitic and Christian theology. Now, again, this is not it's about Gnostic theology, not so much quote unquote Christian theology. In such a view of amber pharmacon of the Brahmanes' bathing ritual, it is just such a vegetable that we might expect to be the entheogen of the Manichaean gnosis. It is in fact precisely as mushroom eaters that the heretical sects are virtually derided, and their heresies, not surprisingly, were stigmatized as poisonous fungi that sprung in direct succession from the earliest and most mythical founders. What can be said or thought more insane, as Augustine put it, railing against the followers of Mani, than for a man eating mushrooms, belching, and detested stomach at the prayer of thanksgiving, and daily requiring of such a diet, for him not to be found to have fallen from the rules of his ascetic regime. That is a quote from Augustine. In this parody of the Eucharist, the Thanksgiving dinner blessing, the devotee of Mani is depicted as extravagantly stuffing himself with his daily vegetarian cuisine, Amanita muscaria mushrooms, truffles, gourmet rice, flatbread, and the costly seasonings, a sweet syrup reduced from wine, pepper, and exotic silphium, and belching with bloated stomach, hardly the asceticism of the professed lifestyle. A common supper of mushrooms, and the special delicacy Amanita Caesarea, not Muscaria, but Caesarea, so called for its delicacy by the Caesars, and expensive truffles, And remember that the Manichaeanism is eating, quote unquote, Jesus. So when they eat the mushrooms, they claim that they're eating Jesus. This was the supper for one of the cult's elect, for he was the agent of the release of light held captive in the food. Through the action of his digestive system, his divine, quote, belch signified the spirit's release. And the gralatio, too, was part of the ceremony by which he absolved the neophytes of the sin involved in gathering the foods. Later, churchmen would repeat such diatribes against the mushroom eaters. And so that's regarding Manichaeanism. And so what do we find when we then look at, again, the Albigensians, the Bogomils, the Paulicianism? Is that when we go back to this book right here, guys, smash that like if you guys can. When we go back to this book right here, we see that Masonry says it goes back to the mystery traditions of Eleusis. Again, this book right here, guys. That psychedelic ancient mystery. And a quote from Albert Pike in the Morals and Dogma book of the Scottish Freemasonic Rite. Masonry is identical with the ancient mysteries, though he later added that is so only to the limited extent, for in Pike's estimation, Masonry is but an imperfect image of the ancient mysteries' brilliancy, the ruins only of their grandeur, and a system that has experienced progressive alterations, the fruits of social events, political circumstances, and the ambitious embassy of its impoverers. Okay, so this whole section is connecting it with the Eleusinian mysteries, talking about yada, yada, yada. So here's a quote from a Grand Master in Freemasonry saying, the affiliation of the worship of the corn goddess to that of the wine god. So Dionysius, the wine god, the corn goddess being Demeter and Persephone. Remember, that's the basis for the Eleusinian mysteries. Is of first importance. The coming of Dionysius brought a new spiritual impulse to the religion of Greece, and it was through this new impulse that the Eleusinian mysteries owed their ultimate dominance. Of the Eleusinian mysteries, the Haola is, I think, the primitive prototype. As the primitive gist of Haloa, there is no shadow of a doubt. The name speaks for itself. Okay, yada, yada, yada. Basically, again, it's just saying that the drunken festivals of Dionysius and Eleusinian mysteries are again being fulfilled within contemporary Masonry. Yada, yada, yada. Then you can move forward to the Amanita Muscaria, Masonic Templary Guardians of the Grail. Again, that was the whole point of the Knights Templar, is that they were going to find the Holy Grail. And so it says, ever since the early mid-13th century, when German knight Wolfram von Eisenbrecht identified them as such in his epic poem Parzival, the legendary Knights Templar had been closely associated with the mythical Knights of the Holy Grail. In the paragraphs which follow, it will be demonstrated that von Eschenbach's association may have been influenced by the development of the Templar knighting ceremony in the York Rite and the Knight Kadosh degree in the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. Again, where the knights they went up to Scotland. Remember, it is on this account that the author has come to view Masonic Templary as something of a modern guardian of the authentic Holy Grail tradition. Aha. And then Viennese Orientalist Joseph von Hamburg-Pugstog, who believed that Baphomet was the name of a deity, was not the name of a deity, but rather the title of a secret Ophite Gnostic initiation ritual. The word Baphomet is a combination of two Greek words, Baphe and Metis, which when combined translate to baptism of wisdom. Of course, this may have been less of a literal and more of a metaphorical baptism, although it is perhaps notable that von Eschenbach specifically refers to the Knights of the Holy Grail as, quote, baptized men. And so in both the Knights Templar ceremony and in the York Rite, the Knight Kados degree in the ancient and accepted Scottish rite, Southern jurisdiction, the candidate is made to steal his obligation by drinking wine from a cap of a human skull, thus uniting neatly the theme of the sacred cup of libation with the skull of the severed head. And then it goes on to talk about how Baphomet is related to Amanita muscaria mushrooms. Wow. Interesting. Talking about Eliphas Levi, all this different stuff. And so it all comes back together, right? All comes back together. The association between the Gorgon skull cap and the hide of the goat points to, of course, directly back to Baphomet, which, if the reader will recall, was depicted by Levi as being part goat. And then yada, yada, yada. And so then it goes on to talk about how this is a quote from The History of Magic, which I have right over there by Eliphas Levi. It says, the progress of magnetism will one day lead to the discovery of the absorbent properties of the mistletoe of the oak. We shall then know the secret of those spongy excrescences which draw their unused surplus from trees and surcharge themselves with their tinctures and sap, the mushrooms, the truffles, the galls of trees. Then we will no more laugh at Paracelsus. Because Paracelsus was an alchemist who he was known for his use of opium. In fact, he's the first person he created laudanum. Laudanum's the mixture of alcohol and gum opium. But anyways, yeah. So Eliphas Levi also said it was the mesmerism of hallucinogens and the contagion of madness. They extracted the poisonous and the narcotic humor from fungi. Aha. So, anyways, guys, that's going to conclude today's stream. That is my argument for a lot of this stuff. Again, and we didn't even get into Chartres Cathedral. So, Chartres Cathedral has a lot of different interesting symbolism. That some people claim is related to... Oh, I spelled that wrong. Claim to psychedelic mushrooms. Let's see if we can find one real quick. There's always these weird, very interesting... I think I have... So you see this top image is from Chartres Cathedral. And so it's very interesting. Some of the stained glass has what some people consider to be potentially psychedelic fragments. So let's see, like this tree behind, this is what they point to, like the tree behind this goat. Like these things right here with these people, they point that these things are mushrooms. This is the claim. So I'll let you guys do. That's why I didn't do Chartres Cathedral. You could spend all day just going through there and looking at what people believe to be various mushrooms. Tons and tons of stained glass. I'd love to go one day and actually see some of this stuff. So here's another one. What again? Are those mushrooms? Are those artistic trees? It's debated. But anyways, guys, that's going to conclude today's stream. Thank you all for being here. I'm now going to dive into some of these super chats. Thank you all very, very much. Please smash that like if you enjoyed today's stream. Oh, wow. Shout out to Jeffrey Ivy. Wow. Thank you so much, brother. I just saw that came in. Very, very appreciative. I will get to that super chat just in a minute. Thank you so very much, Jeffrey Ivy. Wow. Very generous. Very generous. First super chat comes from eBill. Throws in $10 and says, happy to be here. Well, thank you so much, eBill, for your super chat, brother. I really appreciate it. Really, really do. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your contribution. God bless you, eBill. Uber Noob throws in $10 and says, are psychs the forbidden fruit of Eden being associated with the idea of self-deification and determining mortality for oneself? Psych use is like an echo back to the garden, as in the construction of grand towers, i.e. Babylon, ziggurats, pyramids. Are psychedelics the forbidden fruit of Eden being associated with the idea of self-deification and mortality for oneself? Psychedelic use is like an echo back to the garden. Yes. So that's the whole point in today's stream, Uber Noob, is that according to these Gnostic traditions, they do believe that psychedelic substances, they do believe psychedelic substances are in fact creating a sort of deification through this process. And that is exactly the argument right here in this book of The Immortality Key by Murarescu. He's claiming also that the only way that you attain immortality is through the drugs. You just have to get high. And so this same idea is a Gnostic theology throughout the ages. And so, yes, it is an echo back to the original garden. And that's why we saw so many depictions like Plain Kuralt, like, in St. Martin Devick, right? And in St. Michael's, right? We saw a bunch of this stuff. We see it in the Baptistery of Parma, right? We see all this stuff. So, yes, the psychedelics are basically referring back to these ancient traditions. And it's a different type of deification. It's deification through drugs as opposed to deification through following Christ. So, yeah, you're spot on, Uber Noob, and I really appreciate that. Exactly. It's the same thing as Babylon, ziggurats, and pyramids, and that's why the deification through psychedelics and all this stuff is so consistent with the technologically interconnected world of now they want to totally dominate us in a variety of different ways, because it all basically goes back together. So, thank you very much, Ubernoob, for your contribution. Again, he says, are psychedelics the forbidden fruit of Eden? According to Gnostics, yes, and that's why they are in favor of eating it, not against it, because it's Eve that sets us free. It's Eve that brings us into knowledge, because in the Gnostic worldview, the God of the Old Testament is Yaldabaoth. It is Beelzebub. It is the Archon. It is the devil. And so then being associated with the idea of self-deification and determining morality for oneself, yes. Psychedelic use is like an echo back to the garden. Yes. As in the construction of grand towers, i.e. Babylon, ziggurats, pyramids. Yes, exactly. Nailed it, Ubernoob. Thank you very, very much, brother, for your contribution. I really appreciate it. Next super chat comes from John Pro. Shout out to John Pro. We're going to be doing a stream here soon, probably on Moses the Black, and talking about getting the African-American community into Orthodoxy. And so really looking forward to doing that with John Pro here soon. Shout out to John Pro. Go hit up John Pro and get an icon from him. So John Pro throws in a super chat and says, you are doing great work here, David, illustrating the origins of the worldview that has come to dominate our environment. As Christians, we are participants in worldview warfare, so we must know our battlefield. Amen, John Pro. Yeah, thank you so much, brother, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. And that's exactly what we need to realize, that if we are Christians in the contemporary world, we have to realize that we are at war. And one of the ways that we are at war is through these paradigms, through these worldviews, as you're saying. And so John Pro says you're doing great work. Thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate that. the origins of the worldview that Christianity is a psychedelic cult and that all of us Christians are just ignorant because we go to a church and we partake of the Eucharist, which isn't a psychedelic, and it shows how dumb we are. Yeah. So that's what the point of tonight's stream was, is to show the Gnostic origins of this worldview and how we can see its development, how we can see its continuation in the contemporary period through Freemasonry, through all these secret societies. And yeah, the only way to fight it is to see it. You can't fight something you can't see. So thank you so much, John Pro. And we're going to be doing a stream together here soon, man. I really appreciate it. Next super chat comes from Hut Dweller. Shout out to Hut Dweller. He says, great work as always. Appreciate what you do. Seems to me like you have enough material to write a book yourself refuting the heresy against Orthodox communion. Well, I'm certainly working on a research paper right now tracing the technologies of transcendence drug use from, and what I'm dealing with is one of the brief sections is trying to put all of what I just told you guys in 2.5 hours, is trying to put all that basically into 2.5 pages. And, which is a bit of a difficulty for me. I tend to be a little bit verbose, both writing and speaking. And so trying to put all that, maybe 3 pages, put all that together and trace the use of drugs from the ancient period, like these mystery traditions, through Gnosticism, into the Gnostic heretical groups like the Knights Templars, like the Bogomils, like the Cathars, and then into Freemasonry, into Western esotericism, which then you get things like opium use, laudanum use by Paracelsus in alchemy. You get hashish use coming in from Spain, from the Muslims, because again, you can go back to 13th century, 12th century Iran, Persia, and you can see a lot of hashish use. And so the explosion of cannabis use in the Western world can point directly back to Islam. So tracing that concept and then moving into then the inebriation of anesthetics, that really got going in the 1800s, the 19th century, which leads even to like a theorist like William James taking his anesthetics, and that's where he comes up with his definition and theory of religion. And so then you can look at hashish use, opium use, and then somebody like an Aleister Crowley. We know that Helena Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophy, that she was deeply involved with opium use and hashish use, even though other people within Theosophy were arguing against drug use. We know that Helena did use hashish, cannabis, and opium. And then we can look at Aldous Huxley. We can look at mescaline use in the early 20th century and his Doors of Perception and his book Heaven and Hell, and see how that really influenced then that would be the later promulgators of, you could look at the Beat Generation, William Burroughs going down to the Amazon and taking ayahuasca and writing the book The Yahe Letters with Allen Ginsberg, who's again another homosexual. And you see the homoeroticism tied to the use of inebriating substance, whether it be Aleister Crowley and his homosexual relationships, whether it be Ginsberg, whether it becomes Richard Alpert, who becomes Ram Dass, who's also bisexual or homosexual, sleeps with his guru. And you can see this moving into then the contemporary scene today. So then you can trace that into Timothy Leary after the Beat Generation, and you get the 1960s counterculture, which then you get the suppression of this stuff in the 70s, and then the sort of psychedelic culture through rave culture, again fusing. Then you see the psychedelics turn towards away from Eastern mysticism with Leary and in the bunch of the 60s, and it moves back towards shamanism in the 80s and 90s. And that's really then where we're at now. We're in the 21st century, and psychedelic spirituality is like this mixture of shamanic nature religion with like hyper technological emphasis on transhumanism and all this different stuff. So you trace the technologies of transcendence, you trace the drug use through religions, especially in the Western world. And I think there's a consistent thread there, and it's the Gnostic thread. It's Gnostic theology. So anyways, thank you, Hut Dweller. He says, great as always. Appreciate what you do. Seems to me like you have enough material to write a book yourself refuting the heresies against Orthodox communion. I will probably do that eventually for sure. So thank you, Hut Dweller. Really, really appreciate that, and God bless you, brother. Unism throws in a super chat, says, awesome stream. Love your work, man. Been following you for a long while. Keep spreading the good news. We'll do Unism. I really appreciate it, brother. God bless you. Hope everything is well. And then Marcos Ramos throws in a super chat and says, how are these gross rituals any different from what goes on at music festivals? The Gnostic Heresies are still not dead, unfortunately. Lord have mercy. Yes, Marco Ramos, that's exactly what I'm trying to highlight, is that the paradigm, the worldview, the presuppositions of Gnosticism itself, and what we can see as sort of aspects of satanic inversion, it's consistent with the royalty still. And so it's not that the ancient royal Germans or the Knights Templars or these elite figures in Scotland and Britain, that they just participate in these Gnostic rituals of inebriation, of homosexual erotic activity, and that it just stopped. No, it was continued, and it's still continuing. So when you look at contemporary day Satanism, when you look at things like the Bohemian Society, the Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove is totally consistent with what we're talking about with the Knights Templars, with this Gnostic spirituality, with this perennialism that, again, these Freemasons, they worship perennialistically all these different gods. Read Morals and Dogma, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. It's a perennialism, and they worship all these different world religions. So it's totally consistent. The Gnostic spirit's totally with us. It has never gone away. And so, it's still here, and that's why it's useful to be able to see it so you can defend yourself against it. So thank you very much, Marcos Ramos. God bless you, brother. Hope everything is well. And then shout out to Jeffrey Ivy. Gosh dang, brother. I really appreciate it. What a generous super chat. Jeffrey Ivy throws in $200. Thank you so much, Jeffrey Ivy, man. I really, really appreciate it. Jeffrey, really appreciate what you do. Really appreciate all your support, brother. Again, we got to get on phone. We got to have a conversation soon. I texted you today the video you sent me on the Gnosticism. I'm going to do that next week on the Gospel of Philip. That French scholar, the psychologist, mentions the Gospel of Philip, and I'm going to talk about androgyny and read the Gospel of Philip from the Nag Hammadi scriptures and talk about androgyny versus our concepts of sex and gender within orthodoxy. So that is going to be something I'll be doing next week. But again, Jeffrey Ivy, I was talking to you about that. So God bless you, brother. God bless your wife. God bless your family. Hope everything's going well with you, man, over there in Texas. Hope all is well. Thank you for the generous super chat. And Jeffrey says, why did Bone Man 538 get silenced? He was only asking what Henley meant by heretical nonsense. Massively misunderstood and quite literally one of the biggest supporters of the chat. Bone Man 538, I'm not sure. Bone Man 538, guys, did something happen to Bone Man 538? Let me see if somebody... Did Bone Man 538 get deplatformed or anything? What's going on with Bone Man 538, guys? Yeah, if that's Jeffrey, like, he definitely needs to be here. What happened to Bone Man 538? Let me see here. Hold on, Jeffrey. I am looking real quick over on the users. Bone Man 538. Did he get muted? Did somebody ban Bone Man 538? Sorry, guys. I'm just going through the list of banned people. I'm looking for Bone Man 538. Definitely, Jeffrey is one of the biggest supporters of this channel. So definitely want him to be part of the discussion. Bone Man 538. Bone Man 538. I'm not seeing you on the on the banned list. Oh, Bowman 53. Oh, it's all good. Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry guys. I was looking. I should have just waited for the chat to catch up. Okay, so Jeffrey Ivy, thank you so much, brother. Again, we got to catch up here soon. And again, so he said, why did Bowman 538 get silenced? He was only asking what Hindley meant by heretical nonsense, massively misunderstood, and quite literally one of the biggest supporters of the chat. So thank you. Anyways, thank you so much, Jeffrey Ivy. Thank you for everything you do, brother. I really, really appreciate it. Next super chat comes from Jared Fetzer. Jared, shout out to you, brother. We just had a one-on-one yesterday. Love the live stream and super grateful for the one-on-one session we had. I highly recommend everybody support you in that way as well as the others. Well, thank you so much, Jared Fetzer, man. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoyed the one-on-one. I enjoyed our conversation yesterday. So thank you very much, brother, for the super chat. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for signing up for the one-on-ones. I, again, really, really appreciate it. And that looks like that's all the super chats, guys. I just want to tell everyone thank you so much for all the support. Special shout out to Jeffrey Ivy. Man, I really appreciate it. If anybody, again, I got some new videos up on the website for members. If you'd like to become a website member, please do so with the following link. You just can become a website member for $5 a month. I'd greatly, greatly appreciate it. And also, here is the link to set up a one-on-one. If that is something you'd be interested in, I would greatly appreciate that as well. And so, really, really want to thank everybody. Please smash that like, guys, if you're still here. Again, I want to give a special shout-out to Jeffrey Ivy. Thank you very much, brother. Special shout-out to eBill. Special shout-out to UberNoob. Special shout-out to John Pro, who will be on the stream here soon. And shout out to Hut Dweller. Shout out to Unism. Shout out to Marcos Ramos. Shout out to Jared Fetzer. Oh, and we got one more super chat. Dark Corner throws in $4.99. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you, Dark Corner. He says, Fish's production company is Dionysian Productions. Thoughts on psychedelic rock festivals? Well, much of psychedelic rock is obviously influenced and created by the CIA, and so you can look at the Grateful Dead, you can look at the Doors, you can look at all that stuff, look at Laurel Canyon, a lot of that research, and so it is a sort of Gnostic Dionysian spirit, and so I'm not surprised that Fish's production company is Dionysian Productions when Dionysius in the Greek context is the god of intoxication. And so when you get drunk, when you take drugs, when you take psychedelics, you're filled with the spirit of Dionysius, which is also an erotic form. So Dionysius was known for eroticism, sometimes homoerotic, sometimes heteroerotic. But it's no doubt then Fish, being part of the jam band collection there, that they would be titled Dionysian Production. That's totally consistent with everything that we've talked about today on this stream. And so, yeah, I'm totally not surprised. And I imagine the more we would look into this, the more similarities we would find related to these topics. So, yeah, Fish's production company is Dionysian Productions. Thoughts on psychedelic rock festivals? I see rave culture and psychedelic rock festivals as a sort of new shamanic form of ecstasy. So people go there, they take a lot of drugs, and there's syncopated music, high drum beat music. It's basically our rave culture and stuff like that is basically the new sort of tribal drum, right? How in the tribal tradition, you know, we would all get around, we'd be inebriated one way or another, and we would play music, play the drums. You know, some people would have sex, do this or that. And so I see a lot of the rock culture and stuff as sort of akin to that old archaic spirit. So I think that's definitely related one way or another. So yeah, I would say that stuff's definitely tied together, and that the modern raves and psychedelic jam band music, these are a ritual. It is a ritual. And it's funny because one of my friends his wife, and went back when I was really into the rave culture. We used to go to concerts all the time, drop LSD, all this stuff. And I don't really do that anymore. And they don't really do the drug stuff anymore. But she went with her sister to a concert, and very interesting that with one of the DJs went on and started playing music, and she described an experience where she felt pure evil in the presence of pure evil, and said that she felt like, again, the first time she had felt like this, but she was almost stunned. She was almost like locked. She couldn't move, and she just felt like Satan was present, like there was something immensely evil, and it scared the crap out of her. I remember talking to her about it afterwards, and so I think that we have to be really careful, because if you're in an altered state, say you're on psychedelics and you go to one of these concerts and they are inundating you with a lot of satanic symbolism, it can affect you. I mean, look at the Travis Scott concert. You know, the stream that I did on Dancing with the Devil, is that it's definitely there's no question that that is related, and that they are influencing people. I read testimonies of people at the Travis Scott concert who were on LSD and felt like that Satan was present. That, again, they weren't necessarily Christian, but they were going to be when they got back home, because they could feel the sort of sinister spirit. And so, in a way, and it's not that all these Dionysian spirits is like that. I mean, again, obviously Orthodoxy and Christianity has a virtue of sobriety, and I'm sure many of us struggle with that to one degree or another. So if you're struggling with sobriety, that's not, we all have different temptations, that's for sure, whether it be cannabis or drugs or alcohol. So other brothers and sisters are certainly, I'm sure, struggle with that. But there's a particular form in some of these concerts where it is quite demonic, and they're quite clear with it. So anyway, guys, I really appreciate everybody. Again, shout out to Dark Corner, and I really appreciate Jeffrey Ivy, Jared Fetzer. Shout out to you, brother. Really enjoyed the combo. Shout out to Marco Ramos. Really appreciate it, brother. Unism, Hut Dweller, John Pro, who will be on here soon, Uber Noob, and E-Bill. And so just hope everybody enjoys your weekend. I'll be back, I think, Sunday with Subdeacon Mark. We'll be doing a stream on Eucharistic theology in the body of Christ. So definitely join us for that. Please smash that like, guys. Go become a website member, and I will see you all Sunday night. So